Hello and welcome. In today's video, we're going to cover 8 reasons why you should live abroad in Brazil. Hi, for those of you who are new, my name is Sumner.
And I'm Allie.
And just a little bit of background before we get into these 8 reasons, and we'll try to be as efficient as possible. Number 1, a little bit about my background for those of you who are new. For the majority of my life, I've lived in a few different cities, from my dad kind of traveling around for work. But the majority of my life I've spent in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States. Met Allie in college. From there, we've been to Brazil now a few times, just kind of visiting. And for the past 2 months, we've been living in Florianopolis, Brazil. So it's just a little bit about my background and where I'm coming from. And then Allie.
I was born and raised in Brazil, so I lived here my whole life. I actually lived in the northeast part of the country, a city called Fortaleza, the 5th largest city in Brazil. And I went to live in the US, in Cincinnati, for college. I've lived there for 8 years. And then after we got married, lived there for a while. We are now, like he said, living here in Brazil.
So now we're both officially living abroad in Brazil. We didn't just come here for a week to make a video about this. This is based on a lot of research. There's a reason that we chose to live abroad in Brazil as our first destination officially living abroad. And then both, obviously, your experience from being from Brazil and then my experience as a foreigner, I think will make this very, very insightful for a lot of you. So if you do find the video valuable, be sure to like the video, subscribe for more. We got a lot of other great videos here on the channel as well. And comment below with anything you found interesting, anything you'd like for a next video. And without further ado, let's go ahead and actually get into the 8 reasons to live abroad in Brazil. All right, so reason number 1 for living abroad in Brazil is inexpensive, but not cheap. And here's what I mean by that. So a couple points. So like I said, we were previously living in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is considered a relatively cheap place to live in the United States for the quality of the city and how developed it is and all of that. Moving now, and we're living in Florianopolis, Brazil, which is an island in the south part of Brazil. All of our living expenses, or almost every single living expense, is not just lower, but much lower than in the United States because we are earning in US dollar and spending in Brazilian currency, which is Brazilian reais. And just for perspective, currently 1 US dollar is equivalent to about 5 or 5.2 Brazilian reais. And for those of you that are in Europe or other countries, 1 euro is currently equivalent to 5.7 Brazilian reais, which goes very far. So, just to give it more tactical and some more examples, our Airbnb and hotel are much, much less expensive. Uber rides are very cheap. We're living for a month at a time, or even for a week or 2 weeks, in different Airbnbs across the island and in different parts of Brazil. And living in the Airbnbs with utilities, all that is cheaper than our apartment in Cincinnati with utilities.
And another good point is that Florianopolis is actually one of the most expensive cities to live in Brazil. So you also have that range within Brazil, like Fortaleza, or the capital Brasilia, Rio, or wherever. You have that range, but still for us, it's still pretty inexpensive.
Again, so the conversion rate, if you're, like I said, earning in US dollar, euro, or a stronger currency and spending in reais, very, very advantageous. And the part about not being cheap, it's a really great quality place to live, very developed place to live. And that's actually another point that we'll go into a little bit more detail here in a second. But one more example is in regards to healthcare. It's nice that Brazil has a free healthcare system that also works if you're even just living abroad here temporarily or for an extended period. And just for perspective, I had a certain procedure done. It was dermatology. I won't go into too much detail because I don't think you really need to know. But went to the dermatologist for the certain procedure in the United States. About $480 for this procedure. Okay, the same type of procedure done in Brazil at a private clinic. So I could have gone to the free healthcare, but at the private clinic was $50. Okay, so when we've traveled to Brazil in the past, we've tried to kind of hold off going on to the dentist or getting certain procedures or blood work or things like that, and actually get that done in Brazil, because there's a stereotype that a lot of if you're, especially for Americans, by the way, if you're outside the United States, you have horrible health care.
You're unsafe.
You're unsafe. Yeah. If you have any disease or anything, you'll die. Yes, the United States has phenomenal health care, and yes, it's ridiculously expensive. So just saying that for you Americans out there, just something to consider. Look into Brazilian healthcare. Specifically, that's something a lot of people think about. So again, very, very good quality. Again, and the procedure, by the way, was much more effective here, and it was a lot cheaper. So that's for a lot of different, not all, but a lot of medical reasons, for hotel, Airbnbs, rental cars, food, even ordering food, going out to eat. Overall,
it can get addictive.
Yeah, it can get addictive for how inexpensive it is. Okay, so like I said, it's not the cheapest place in the world, but it is very, very inexpensive, especially for what you get. It's probably one of the best in between of cheapest for what you get. So something to keep in mind. One of the biggest reasons we actually kind of considered living in Brazil. So that's reason number one, inexpensive.
Number two reason to live abroad in Brazil is that Brazil is a developed country, to a lot of people's surprise.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think that Brazil is just remote or jungle and there's not a lot of infrastructure.
Well, yeah, and I will just add this is when I mentioned to some guys that I worked out with in Cincinnati that I was coming to Brazil, they said, "Oh, do they have Wi-Fi there?" Or people think you literally live in the middle of the jungle. At least some Americans do. Not all Americans, obviously, but I got those kind of questions. But no, yeah, it is very developed.
I got those questions all the time. When I moved to the US, people ask if we had TVs or seat belts in the car. Brazil is a developed country. And that makes point number one even sweeter. Because there are places like, for example, maybe Southeast Asia or Central America, maybe parts of Africa that are inexpensive, and that's amazing. A lot of digital nomads love going to those places, but it may be a little bit hard to find things that you want and need in terms of maybe healthcare or services, some kind of food that you like or products, clothing, I don't know. But in Brazil, believe it or not, it is a developed country and you can find pretty much anything you want. You actually found one of your favorite beers here.
Oh yeah, so I'm weird. I like a very specific type of beer. And Cincinnati, there's a huge German influence, so there's a huge variety of beer there, and in the United States in general. And it's sour beer. So Germany, Belgium, United States, these are places where it's a little bit more common to find this. When I came to Brazil, we were going through the supermarket, just kind of a regular supermarket, and I found the type of beer that I like, the sour beer that I liked. Bought it, and actually some of my favorite beer that I've had is actually here in Brazil. Something I was not personally expecting, and there are a lot of examples like that. Yeah, from like clothing to different services. There's a lot more infrastructure for how inexpensive it is. That's why I kind of say I think it's kind of like a really great kind of equilibrium of both there.
And it's amazing because it is inexpensive. Normal, regular people like us, people that are not rich, we have access to things that, for example, in the US we didn't. Like we wouldn't maybe go to some sort of service. Like I wouldn't get my nails done every week in the US because it's so expensive. Or for example, there are businesses here that will come to your house. They can detail all your car for not a lot of money, or you can get pet sitting for a lot cheaper. Many services and products that, because Brazil in general is more inexpensive and is developed, people like us, we have access to.
Reason number 3 to live abroad in Brazil is feeding monkeys. I'm just kidding. No, but we actually literally just took a break right outside. You can't see it. Maybe we'll try to edit it in here. There's a family of like 4 little monkeys, and we just fed them some bananas, which ties in perfectly with our actual reason number 3, and that is the food in Brazil. Okay, so a couple things. So number 1 is there are certain foods, especially fruits or very kind of unique foods that have come about from Brazilian culture that literally you can only find in Brazil, or it's extremely difficult to find in any other country in the world. So number 1 is the uniqueness of the food here, which by the way is delicious. And then number 2 is how fresh and readily available a lot of this food is. So there are certain things I could buy here that I could not find anywhere in any part of the Midwest of the United States, maybe in some weird, super niche, very specific grocery stores or places like that, maybe. Especially...
And it wouldn't be fresh.
No, exactly. And because it's imported, it's not fresh. And some, very popular examples would be, different fruits from the Amazon, like acai, guaraná, a lot that unfortunately I can't really pronounce. Custard apple. You can find that in the US, but yeah, it is much more fresh. I mean, even oranges, a lot of fruits, avocado, a lot more fresh. But even we are able to find a lot more, for those of you who kind of care about this, grass-fed beef, farm fresh eggs. A lot of the ingredients here, the same ingredients that cheese, a lot of the ingredients that you can find in other countries, we found here and we've been to a few different countries, are very, very fresh. So when you're living here, you can find a lot of delicious, fresh ingredients. Even if it's similar to what you already consume, you may find that it's even better here in Brazil when you make your own food. Obviously, a lot of delicious food. Anytime you want to go out to eat, you can enjoy pizza, hamburgers, things that you may be able to find in the United States or Europe or other places. But you can also enjoy very unique Brazilian dishes or cuisine like coxinha, which is something we really love. Yeah. We're gonna have whole videos on Brazilian food, so we can go all day about that. But unique, fresh, and inexpensive. One of the best reasons, one of the things I love most about Brazil is the food.
Reason number 4 to live abroad in Brazil is the people. Amazing people like me.
Yeah, there's some pretty good people in Brazil that
Just
I've
kidding.
met.
But seriously, Brazilians are such a kind and helpful people. And in general, honestly, they're truly interested in talking to you, in knowing how you're doing. And like, it's not uncommon for you to go anywhere, honestly, run an errand, or if you go to the beach and you leave with a new best friend. Actually, just happened to us.
Yes.
When we went hiking here in Florianopolis. We met a couple up there at the top. It was just us and the other couple. And honestly, we've become friends. We've already hung out with them maybe like 4 times. Anyway, Brazilians are truly just a warm people. They want to talk to you. They're interested and they're happy and they like helping you. I don't know, a lot of people maybe think that we have a little bit of an issue with personal space. And that's because we do like staying close. We like touching, we like talking with our hands. And I don't know if that's an issue for certain cultures, but usually most people who come to Brazil, they love how warm and how helpful and how loving Brazilian people are.
5th reason to live abroad in Brazil, English speakers. Specifically, more English speakers than a lot of people think. Now, if you look at different statistics online, you'll get a kind of an official somewhere between a 3 to 7% of the Brazilian population fluently speak English. However, I have found, and this is really interesting to me as a native English speaker, that going to different places like barbershops, airports, even like on the beach or all these different places, many times in whatever group of Brazilians that I'm surrounded with, there's a larger percentage of Brazilians that can speak English than Spanish, because I can speak a little bit of Spanish, a little bit of Portuguese. So it's interesting to see that a lot of times you'll find more Brazilians that speak English than Spanish, where Brazil is surrounded by Spanish-speaking countries. And for those of you that aren't familiar, Brazil being originally a Portuguese colony, Brazilian Portuguese is the language. It's not Brazilian, and no, it's not Spanish. So just keep that in mind. If you're like, oh, I know Spanish, I'd love to come to Brazil. Yes, there's some similarity. We could go to many videos about the differences between Spanish and Portuguese.
Yeah.
It's a different language. Okay, so it is Portuguese. However, like I said, there are a lot more English speakers than I ever thought. Yes, 3 to even 6% seems very low, but that's for fluent. What I found just personally is many times I've been around, if I ever needed something, there was someone who spoke enough English. And honestly, with today's technology, I mean, with Google Translate and all these different new products and tools coming out, it's very easy to communicate even basic sentences with people in other languages. And again, going back to our last point, because people here and I completely agree with this, are honestly so helpful. Like, complete strangers will honestly go out of their way to help you. And at first I was kind of like, okay, so they're gonna try to like ask me for money or something, or like, you know, I'm American, so I'm like, you know, very pro-independent and individualistic and all that kind of stuff. But because people are so helpful, they'll walk you through and kind of listen through, where maybe in other countries, not to call names, but if you're kind of struggling with the language, they really could care less.
Your problem.
So number 1, technology obviously makes it very easy. Number 2, there's a huge likelihood, especially in very metropolitan, larger areas, Rio, São Paulo, you know, Salvador, Brasilia, Fortaleza, Florianopolis, all these bigger cities, you're bound to find people in your vicinity that speak English, maybe not completely 100% fluently, but well enough to get by. And Brazilians are helpful enough to really help walk you through whatever you need. And there's been times where I've even communicated just with my hand gestures, and that's gotten me pretty far. If I wanted to buy something, if I wanted to know where the bathroom was, if I wanted to, you know, get directions to the beach or whatever it might be, you'd be surprised. So
yeah, but I was also gonna say that it is very common for Brazilians to grow up and not only take English classes in high school, how usually it's common for Americans, for example, to take Spanish classes, but it's very common for people to do even an outside course of English. So maybe 3 to 6% is fluent, but you can find a lot of people who will understand the basic phrases.
And it's funny, a lot of stations, you'll hear a lot of actually American, specifically United States, radio stations or songs and things like that, very popular.
Signs, English signs, you can find too.
Yeah, exactly. So again, the point is, I think you'll find a lot more English speakers than you realize. And then also, even if you can't, Brazilians are honestly, going back to the last point, so helpful to really get you whatever you need. So that's point number 5.
Reason number 6 to live abroad in Brazil is Brazil's natural beauty. So a lot of people think that Brazil is only sunny beaches, like they can only picture either Rio, the beaches, or they can picture only the Amazon.
Exactly.
Jungle, nothing. Well, when I say nothing, meaning more remote. But actually Brazil is full of natural gems. You can find things like beautiful national parks like Chapada Diamantina, or crystal clear water beaches that would maybe resemble places in the Caribbean like Maragogi or Fernando de Noronha Island, or even places that like this one where we live now, Florianópolis, which is a beautiful tropical hill coast city, an island, but it's pretty close to the continent. But still, it could even resemble a little bit of Hawaii. A lot of people say that's what Florianópolis is like. But anyways, there's so much to see in Brazil. There's a diversity of things. Natural gems, beautiful, unique, breathtaking places like the waterfalls. Foz do Iguaçu is beautiful. Brazil is actually the 5th largest country in the world. I don't know if you knew that, but that means not only because of its size, the diversity of nature and different climates and things that you get to experience. It's beautiful. And me actually growing up in Brazil, and even now, I didn't even know everything that there was in Brazil. We were just researching this. We found these beautiful dunes that we're planning on visiting too, and that it's in the northeast of Brazil, very close to where I grew up. That I think I heard about it growing up, but I never really saw and never visited for sure. So there's so much to see. You can take your pick. There's so much beauty in Brazil.
So reason number 7 for living abroad in Brazil is the climate. So obviously climate and nature are very kind of closely intertwined, but they are different. And what most people think about when they think of Brazil is kind of like warm or even hot, sandy beach. Yes, there are a lot of beautiful, warm beaches all along Brazil. It has a huge coastline, one of the biggest countries with the longest coastline in the world. However, there's a huge range, not just of nature that we already discussed, but also climate. So, for example, Ali, where your family's from in Fortaleza, which you are obviously already know, being closer to the equator, it's about like 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about, I think, 27 degrees Celsius all year round. Yes, it can get a little bit warmer, a little bit colder.
You get the rainy season or not rainy season,
yes,
but it's pretty similar.
It's a bigger difference in terms of rain than it is in terms of temperature difference. And that's in the northeast of Brazil, closer to the equator, right? But then down in the south of Brazil, which is where we are now, is in the southern part, it still gets as warm as kind of 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 27 degrees Celsius, and gets as cold as 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, I believe, about 10 degrees Celsius. So you have a little bit, so if you don't want super hot, super humid, anything like that, there are places for you. And by the way, if you're not a beach lover, Brazil's an awesome place for you. There's a lot more places without beaches than there are with beaches. Yeah. It's just one of those stereotypes I think a lot of people believe. Yeah. But regardless, if you want sunny, sandy beach, Brazil's got that for you. If you want more mountains, if you want to live in a mountain or in a cooler place, Brazil has that for you. In my view, it's very much like different paradises, especially compared to the United States. The United States is also very diverse in terms of its climates, from the West Coast to the East Coast, the north of the United States, the south of the United States. However, there's only a few places that are really, especially California or maybe Hawaii, that are really, really beautiful kind of places with in terms of climate. Where in Brazil, there's a huge range. Like the warm is still very, very nice and more temperate, being closer to the coast.
It's big this way.
Yeah, Brazil's, if you look geographically, bigger north to south, where a bigger country like the United States is more, east to west. I'm not really sure about Australians' climate, although I'd be very, very interested. That's the one place we want to visit. Yeah. But very diverse. Whatever you want, cooler or hotter. You want beach, you want mountains and hiking, or whatever you like. Brazil is likely going to have that for you. So that's reason number 7.
Reason number 8 to live abroad in Brazil, last but not least, is the cultural diversity. Brazil was influenced by so many different cultures, like places in Europe like Italy and Germany, to places like Japan or Africa, and native culture as well. The point is, you can find all kinds of everything in Brazil. You find all kinds of people, all kinds of food, all kinds of events that you can participate in, and cultural holidays and all kinds of festivals. And the truth is, actually, not only Brazil was influenced, but today, a lot of communities still live heavily under that influence. For example, you can find huge Japanese communities in Brazil. You can still try, even in Fortaleza, we just had it last time that we were there. We had vatapá and acarajé, which is a very typical African meal.
Or African influenced.
African influenced
Brazilian
meal,
dish,
yes.
Yeah. Delicious, yeah.
So good. And so we have all types of recipes and dishes, as well as people. A lot of people, I don't know if you've heard of this, but Brazil is known as a melting pot. It's very hard to put an ethnicity to a Brazilian. Oh, this person looks Brazilian. Yeah. Even though Sumner is really good at this, he's really good at spotting Brazilians anywhere. It is very unique how diverse we are.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the things we absolutely love about Brazil.
And that's one thing that I'll say too about, because the United States, if you're American watching this, you're like, oh wait, but the United States is also known as a melting pot, right? For how large it is and for all the different immigrants from, same thing, Japan, African, Native American, European, all of this, Middle East, everywhere, right? Everywhere in the world. Where I find about the United States is it's very diverse, but it's very separate. Like everyone has their own kind of separate communities. Yeah. Where in Brazil, there's much more mixed. People, like the literal individual, at least, genetically are much more mixed in the cultures. And they're still the separate and kind of on their own. Like there are certain communities in the South that are like only or predominantly German speaking. Yes. There are some very communities, at least from what we've heard, we want to go there next actually, in Bahia, that still have strong connections with Nigeria and other countries in Africa. Again, from what we've heard, you can fact check on that. Japanese speaking communities, all of this, right? So there's both the cultural mixing as well as to where, if you're on the phone with someone, you have no idea like what they look like or what they, where in the United States, it may not be the case. Again, not one way isn't worse or anything like that. It's just different.
Very interesting. Yeah. And we carry out still a lot of traditions from that influence. And at the same time, we live like everyone else. Like we are influenced by those different cultures, but it became our melting pot, our mix of things, and that became the Brazilian culture, which I love. Yeah,
I will say I love it as well. It's a very, very unique, beautiful, incredible place. So these are 8 of many reasons to live in Brazil, and hopefully now Brazil is a place that you've now added to your list as a potential opportunity, or even maybe your next place where you live abroad. Like I said, we've spent collectively, months or even, years here. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. Highly recommend. And if you want to see other videos going into more depth on Brazilian food, Brazilian culture, different places to live abroad in Brazil, and we definitely have recommendations for you, be sure to check out our other videos here on the channel and subscribe for more if you did find this valuable, as well as you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, and other social media platforms as well for some different types of content, more kind of, lifestyle of what we do on a day-to-day basis, so you can really see the real kind of perspective that we have going in and living here in Brazil. We'll have all those links in the description below. And also, let us know, is there anything that we missed? If you're a native Brazilian, be sure to comment that below. Anything you'd like us to go into a little bit more detail about, right? The video doesn't have to, questions. The video doesn't have to end here. Let us know in the comment section below. And like I said, as always, thank you guys so much for your support. Thanks for watching. We hope you found this extremely valuable. Be sure to subscribe for more, and we'll see you in the next video. Ciao.